Greetings, AP European History citizens, for our review on Unit 6 on the French Revolution and Napoleon, looking at the review sheet from top to bottom here. Enlightenment ideas of these philosophers and how it had an impact on the French Revolution. John Locke, you have the idea that government is created by free people who are born with natural rights, and that government is set up to protect their rights, and they have the right to change that government. Voltaire, remember, he's an advocate of the separation of church and state. He is a believer in freedom of speech and religion. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said that government should be by the people via the general will, and he accused the church and the monarchy of keeping people in chains. Montesquieu, remember, in The Spirit of the Laws, he advocates divided government like Britain, that there should be a legislature, there should be a constitutional monarchy, and there should be independent courts, all balancing each other. What caused the financial problems of the French monarchy in 1789? Well, a number of things. The French lost the 7 Years' War to Great Britain, also called the French and Indian War from an American vantage point. The French lose North America. And then the French get even by backing the Americans during the Revolution, but this is costly and it drains a lot of money out of the French treasury. There's the sheer cost of running Versailles, and to boot, you have right before 1789 a series of bad harvests. So there is a deficit that the French government is running. The French three estates, remember, the first estate are the clergy, the second estate the nobility, the third estate is everybody else. And for the longest time, this was primarily peasant farmers, but there's this growing middle class, which includes professionals, that would be businessmen, merchants, lawyers, theologians, university professors, engineers, whatever, those type of people. You have the artisan craftsmen in the growing cities, and then you have day laborers. The tennis court oath and their demand. Well, the third estate is going to challenge this idea of voting by group or by order. They want individual voting, and they're locked out of the meeting hall at Versailles, so they go to the tennis court, and they go with some sympathetic first and second estate allies, and they demand a new constitution, and they declare themselves to be a new representative national assembly. And there's that painting by Jacques-Louis David. It's an example of neoclassical art, that the French here are kind of sort of like the new Greeks. They're creating a new democratic order, sort of like the Athenians. The fall of the Bastille. The street mob is going to think that the king is sending the army to attack the National Assembly, and the Parisian mob here will attack this fort called the Bastille, and they're going to kill the guards and free the prisoners inside. And the fall of the Bastille is a symbol of the fall of the power of Louis XVI. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. This is a document declaring the rights of the French people, an end of aristocratic privileges, the opening of government offices on the basis of merit, that the French are guaranteed rights of liberty and property and equality and resistance to oppression, that all men are equal, and there'll be things like freedom of press and freedom of speech and freedom of religion in this document. The Women's March on Versailles is these market women are angry at this belief that the royal family is hoarding grain at Versailles in a time of food shortage, and they're going to march to Versailles. They're going to invade the palace, kill some of the guards there, and they're going to forcibly remove the king, the queen, and their son, and bring them back to what's essentially house arrest in Paris at the Tuileries Palace. Some famous women of the Revolution to know. Olympe de Gouges is the author of The Rights of Woman, which sort of corresponds to the rights of man and citizen. Charlotte Corday assassinates Marat in his bathtub. She's a Girondine. And remember, Marat is this guy whose newspaper is supporting the killing of enemies of the government. And then there's Marie Antoinette, who is this unpopular Austrian wife of Louis XVI. Her nickname is Madame Deficit, and the belief is that she is a spendthrift, that she is extravagant at a time when many people are suffering in the provinces and in the cities from these bad harvests, lack of food, high bread prices. The Declaration of Pillnitz, this is when the Prussians and the Austrians declare their support for Louis XVI. and they threaten to invade France if the royal family is hurt. The Flight to Varennes is when Louis XVI tries to flee to neighboring Austria, and he's captured just short of the border, and he's brought back to Paris. And this is sort of proof of his complicity with plotting with the Prussians and the Austrians and the émigrés to attack the revolution. The September massacres. After Prussia invades France, a street mob is going to attack prisoners in jails all around Paris. About 1,400 will be brought out and brutally bludgeoned and stabbed and hacked and killed. And they're accused of being counter-revolutionaries. They're accused of plotting with the enemies against the revolution. And in this group are going to be many priests, many people who are not supporters of this growingly radical revolution. The groups in the convention, you've got the Jacobins, are this radical group that wants a republic here, and the Mountain is the most radical. These are the people they're in the upper tiers on the left-hand side of the assembly, and they are mostly from Paris, and they're focusing on the needs of the urban poor. And one of the things is they want a price limit on bread. The Girondins, or the Girondists, represent the provinces, and the Gironde is a river which is far south in what would be the province of Bordeaux, and the Girondists are resistant to this centralization of power in Paris. And they're one of the groups that are going to fall victim to the Committee of Public Safety and the regime of Maximilien Robespierre. The two phases of the French Revolution, you'll see in different textbooks, they'll call the revolution and the radicalizing of the revolution, or the two phases, or the two parts. But the deal here is the first phase initially of the revolution wants a constitutional monarchy. The French want a government like the British. They want to keep their king, but they want him limited by a parliament, which they call the Estates General, or eventually the National Assembly after the Tennis Court Oath. The second phase is when the revolution becomes radicalized after there's civil war within, invasion from without. And the second phase is going to declare France a republic. They're going to remove the king from his monarchical position, but later they're going to kill the king as the revolution descends into a reign of terror. The Committee of Public Safety is created in 1793 after France has been invaded and after there's civil war in many of the provinces. And the first goal of the Committee of Public Safety is defensive, to defend the revolution. But then it becomes an instrument of blunt terror, trying to force this idea of a republic of virtue based upon this idea of Maximilien Robespierre, that this should be a government based on reason, and things like the church are going to be done away with. The Levée en Masse is a mass conscript army which successfully pushes back invasion forces and then will invade itself neighboring countries such as Austria and Prussia, Spain, Britain, and the Netherlands. They will fight Britain, but they're not going to invade Britain, of course. The Reign of Terror, 1793 to 1794, you see this massive guillotining of enemies of the revolution. And if you include all the people who die in prison and who die of suicide and things like that, you're looking at upwards of around 40,000 people in this one-year period. Marat is a journalist and publisher of the Friend of the People, and he is the guy who's calling for executions. And in his newspaper, he's listing people who should die, and these people are going to be dying in the 1792 September Massacre, and later they're going to be, dying in this reign of terror. Napoleon is going to issue the Concordat, and the Concordat is a sort of partially kissing and making up with the Catholic Church. He's not seeking to eradicate Catholicism. In fact, Catholicism is agreed to be not the official, but to be the religion of the great majority of the French people. The church is free to worship. Sunday worship is reestablished. And the papacy is allowed to depose bishops, but the government still is going to choose them. The state still pays salaries, and all clergy must still swear allegiance to the state. And the Catholic Church agrees to give up all claims to Catholic lands that have been seized by the revolutionary government. So this is a huge improvement on what was happening under Robespierre, but it's not exactly what the Catholic Church would prefer, but this is definitely better than what they had. Priests are no longer being hunted down and killed by the hundreds. The Code Napoleon, or the Napoleonic Code, this is when Napoleon, when he takes over neighboring countries, is going to abolish feudalism. He's going to, in law, say that everyone is equal, and there's going to be things like freedom of religion. And basically, this is sort of the erasing of a lot of feudal laws and replacing them with the values of the French Revolution: equality, abolition of aristocratic privileges, and equal rights for all. As far as Russia, you should know that when the French invade Russia in 1812, this is sort of the beginning of the end of Napoleon here. Somewhere upwards of 90% of the French army is going to die in the brutal, bitter cold of the Russian winter, as a combined Russian and German army and Austrians pushed the French back into France. Napoleon will be captured for the first time in 1814 and exiled to Elba. The painting, the 3rd of May of 1808, and its point here, this is a painting by Francisco Goya, and it shows a firing squad of French soldiers killing Spanish citizens, and these citizens were supposed to be guerrillas who were, sort of sniping at French soldiers, and this is a commentary on the French Revolution that's not at all favorable, rather that the French Revolution is brutal, that it's cruel, that it's murderous, and that this is caused by replacing faith with reason. That lantern on the ground represents the artificial light of reason, and the church that's in the shadow represents a church which is being oppressed and suppressed. The Marseillaise, this is this bloodthirsty French national anthem of the revolutionaries. The civil constitution of the clergy, this is when the French government took over all Catholic church land. About 1/6 of the land of France was controlled by the church, including monasteries. And what happens is the church becomes a department of the state. Salaries are paid for by the state, and the people get to vote for their priests and for their bishops. And furthermore, all clergy must swear an oath of allegiance to the French government, or else they may be fired or lose their pensions. And as the revolution radicalizes, they will be arrested, and many of them will die. The dechristianization of France, when Maximilien Robespierre is in power, you have this cult of the supreme being, this deism replacing Catholicism, and Notre Dame is turned into a temple of reason. The traditional calendar is changed for these 10-day weeks. And the idea is to get rid of Sunday, get rid of all holy days, get rid of Easter and Advent and Lent and Easter and Saints' days. The idea is just to exterminate and pull out any, uproot all Christian vestiges. You have the arrest and the persecution and the execution of opponents of the church, especially dissenting clergy. So there are the main points here that you should know for the test. All right, gang, study early, study well, and know what's on the review sheet. Signing out.